Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. Happy New Year. So this is going to be my Sherlock special video. This is really like a Series 4 special. It meant to tell the story of how Moriarty survived or did not survive. Basically just to explain the end of what happened at Series 3. Careful for spoilers if you haven't seen Sherlock, the Abominable Bride. Now, just to explain what's going on, if you haven't seen Sherlock before, at the end of Series 3, the Moriarty character seemingly came back from the dead. The twist of this episode is that Sherlock goes into his mind palace, and the mind palace just happens to be during the original timeline of the Conan Doyle stories. While he's in the mind palace, he uses this Ricoletti unsolved case to find out how Moriarty might have been able to come back. So it wraps up Series 3, tees up Series 4. Now they're making a regular Series 4. There'll be 3 regular episodes, each 90 minutes, just like there normally are, but they won't air till next year, so it'll be another full year before we get more. But what I'm going to do is my top 10 WTF moments, and then I'll do a bunch of Easter eggs. Now, because Sherlock episodes are 90 minutes long, and they take so much longer to write the scripts, they are crammed with Easter eggs from the Conan Doyle stories, but they also draw from all things Sherlock. So like there's stuff from the 1970s movie. This story, the overarching Ricoletti story, The Abominable Bride, is taken from unpublished Sherlock Holmes stories. So any Sherlock Holmes story that's ever been told in a book, on screen, is fair game for them to pull from. So top 10 WTF, starting with number 1, Sherlock and Watson meeting for the first time in full period. A lot of these retreads of the original time that they met. And as Sherlock explains later when he wakes up on the plane, sometimes Sherlock reads through Watson's stories of their adventures to help him work through new problems. So Sherlock in the Mind Palace is rereading through their entire history together, all their adventures, to try and figure out this Moriarty problem. Number 9 WTF, Mary in the flashbacks every bit as clever as she is in present day. I love the way that they play with flashback Mary too, and they kind of tee up, like the first time you see her, they tee up that Watson is kind of neglectful, which is a theme that runs across the episode. Men taking advantage of or mistreating women. Number 8 WTF, meet the Abominable Bride. So we get the tee up. They had this amazing cinematography where like you shoot from the room ends up being on the crime scene. This goes to show you what you can do when you spend this much time shooting an episode. Now, of course, it's bad because you don't get as much Sherlock, but it looks so much more amazing. Shotgun wedding for the win. Of course, we find out later in the episode that she faked her death using 2 different guns in a fake body. On to number 7 WTF, meet male Molly Hooper. It's amazing what you have to do to get ahead in a man's world. There's a lot going on in this scene, but I think largely it's just meant to serve the theme of women being underserved in such a patriarchy, especially 19th century Great Britain. But when you think about it, this is all Sherlock imagining all these things, so he's actually gender-bending Molly Hooper and kind of weaves her into this story, so it seems like he is aware that he is mistreating her in modern day. Like everything that's happening inside this mind palace is all of his own construct. He is doing that consciously, so maybe when she shows up in Series 4, modern day Molly Hooper, he'll treat her a lot nicer. We'll see if he learns anything from this. On to number 6 WTF, meet Fat Mycroft. Now this is actually much closer to the original depiction of the character. Like if you look at this picture here, this is what Conan Doyle's version of the character looked like. Mycroft, much more clever than Sherlock. And I think it's really telling of how Sherlock thinks very little of himself, that Mind Palace Sherlock makes fun of Mind Palace Mycroft by telling him he's getting fatter and fatter. That's the only comeback that he has when Mycroft makes fun of Sherlock for being slow. Which means in no uncertain terms, Sherlock really has zero self-esteem, which does seem connected to the fact that he's such a drug addict. So really when Mycroft is making fun of Sherlock, when everyone inside the Mind Palace is making fun of Sherlock, even Mary makes fun of Sherlock inside the Mind Palace, Sherlock is really making fun of himself. But I gotta say though, Fat Mycroft is just so funny. Just the bet about how soon he's going to die. I've got a bet to win, and he just starts grabbing plum pudding. On to number 5 WTF, meet Lady Carmichael, and they try to save her husband, but he winds up dying at the hands of the Abominable Bride too. Later we find out after Sherlock figures it out in his mind palace, we learn that Janine is this Abominable Bride, and that the other Abominable Bride is played by Molly Hooper, which I think is kind of funny. It's really Sherlock projecting his own thoughts onto the case, so there may have been multiple Abominable Brides at that scene in that case. But the way they're telling the story, it was actually Lady Carmichael who dressed up as the bride to kill her husband. But I love the way they take present-day characters and weave them into that historical narrative, like, oh, we've been mistreating them, through Series 1 to Series 3. On to number 4 WTF, the Invisible Army Explained. The interesting thing about this is that Mycroft had worked it out in his head when they went to see him for the first time, meaning that Sherlock had already worked it out, but I need you to do the legwork. So we go through the paces, but then we find out that Mary has sent a telegram to Sherlock. She figured it out before they did, so they show up and all the masks come off, and it's womankind, like all of womankind is this invisible army, taking the mantle of the bride to help any woman in need. So basically, the Abominable Bride is kind of like the mantle of the bat. It's kind of a Batman thing. One goes down, another picks up the symbol. On the number 3 WTF, Sherlock versus Moriarty, round 1. And it was around the time I saw him reach for the syringe and then the ghostly voice of Moriarty spoke that I thought that we might be viewing things in some sort of dream state. I didn't think it was the Mind Palace right away, but the old-timey Mind Palace with the scraps of paper, that was so amazing. So it's like he's in his Mind Palace, but inside the Mind Palace, he is also inside the Mind Palace. He's like 2 levels of Inception down. We have to go deeper, which he does later when he goes to the Reichenbach Falls, when he has like the final confrontation with Moriarty. But on to number 2 WTF, did you make a list? So we hear that the first time, and it sounds kind of weird because it's Fat Mycroft saying it, and they haven't revealed that Sherlock is in present day, just having a Mind Palace episode because of a drug cocktail that he took. So you wake up in present day and you're like, WTF, we find out that it's been 5 minutes since the end of series 3, and then we jump forward in time. Like he goes back into the Mind Palace a couple times throughout this as he finally figures out that Moriarty did die, and now I know what he's going to do next. But I'll say my number 1 WTF is that end credits tag where it goes back to the Mind Palace and they talk about the case being called the Abominable Bride. Like they think of different names. I hope you'll note it's one of my very few failures, Watson. The weird thing about this scene and the way it's anachronistic is that it's almost positing, just for a couple seconds, that the old-timey Mind Palace Sherlock was actually imagining all the present day stuff. So you're meant to think, who is imagining who? Like, is this the version of Sherlock that's Mind Palacing future Sherlock? Or is it future Sherlock Mind Palacing old-timey Sherlock? Huge WTF that's going to have you running in circles for a little while, but just, classic Moffat Doctor Who techniques, especially like the Doctor inside the confession dial and the way that that plays with time and perception of reality. So let me know in the comments, what's your favorite moment from this episode, and where would you rank this on all the Sherlock episodes so far? I'll say right now, this isn't my favorite, but it's tied for first with His Last Vow. And then my next favorite after that is Empty Hearse. My least favorite is still Hound of Baskerville. I feel like that's the weakest episode of Sherlock so far. But just a reminder, Series 4 won't be coming till 2017, but it'll premiere this time next year. You will be able to see Martin Freeman during Captain America Civil War in May, and then I think it's November for Doctor Strange and Benedict Cumberbatch. But just to talk about a couple of the Easter eggs, the 7% solution is actually a story by Nicholas Meyer. It's also the relative amount of cocaine when he takes a dosage. Like it's a syringe that's only 7% cocaine. That's like the strength of solution that he takes. The moment when they're at Lady Carmichael's mansion waiting for the ghost to show up for the first time, that also happened during the Speckled Band. They have this stakeout moment where they just sit and talk to each other. The 5 Orange Pips was an actual story by Conan Doyle. At the beginning of the episode, when Watson's like, maybe it's secret twins, and Sherlock's like, it's never twins, Watson. It actually was twins during Sign of 3. And when I said that this episode as a whole was based on the unpublished stories, someone in real life found a bunch of Conan Doyle unpublished Sherlock stories in an attic somewhere after 80 years of being lost. But if you guys spotted any other Easter eggs that I didn't mention in the video, just write them below in the comments. There were a lot of references to the normal Sherlock episodes like series 1 to 3, and I think there were a couple lines of dialogue whenever they first walked into 221B Baker Street from the 1970 movie. But while you guys wait for my next video to post, you can click here for my Sherlock playlist with all the Sherlock videos that I've ever done. I think I only did up to series 2. I don't think I did series 1 videos. And you can click here for my 10 craziest Star Wars Episode 7 theories. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody, let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.